Good morning, everyone. It's Saturday again, and I'm with you to conclude the book of Joshua today. We started it last week, and we are going to conclude it today. Joshua, we said, was a book of conquest, battles, killing, and eventually taking the land of Canaan, which becomes Israel. So last week we ended with the conquest of Jericho, the walls falling down miraculously, and the people went in, rushed the city, and took Jericho. Today, the second location, the second stronghold, if you will, is Ai. About 12,000 people, not very big, situated not too far from where Jericho is. And Ai was called the gateway to Western Palestine. And the people of Israel, Joshua's army here, think, why send all the army up there? They're small in number, we can take it easily. Overconfidence. And what they do not know is a man named Achan, who previously took some items, gold, silver, money really, that was under a ban that God proposed. He didn't want anybody touching that. Achan violates the word of the Lord and takes this booty, if you will, buries it, and doesn't tell anybody about it. So now Joshua sends the army up there, again, not all of them, and they're defeated. In fact, 36 of them are killed in battle. This blows Joshua away. He's under the mandate, we're going to have all the land. God has promised it. He's already defeated Jericho. How did this happen? Why did this happen? So the Lord speaks to him, and there's an old saying here in church life, there's sin in the camp. You might say one man's sin caused the downfall here where they lost this battle. Yes. Can that happen in church life? I believe it can. You've got somebody that is, uncontested, say the leadership knows of sin in the camp through a particular individual. They don't deal with it, and all of a sudden things begin to go wrong. That can happen. So Joshua finds out who it is, the practice of lots, and it comes down to Achan. And he gets a confession from him. We're in chapter 6. And we say here that the man Achan is stoned with stones. And retribution is paid here. So now they are back in covenant relationship with God. And they go up and they begin to take Ai. Now the people of Ai are extremely confident that, hey, we beat them once, here they come again, we'll beat them again. But they don't know what transpired with Achan. So Joshua has a retreat here. Strategy. How many of you know there's strategy in warfare? You just can't come in with a strong frontal assault all the time and think that's going to work. Joshua gets this word that they are to split the army in two. He goes up and begins to contest Ai and then retreats like before. But he has another part of the army coming in from behind that the Aites don't know about. They all come out of the city except maybe a few people there to keep the city fortified, but the large army overtakes them and they set fire to the city. The men of Ai are pursuing Joshua and his men down the mountain. All of a sudden they look behind, the city's on fire. And now those people in the city come out from the rear and attack Ai. So they're caught in between from the rear and Joshua's people, and they are easily defeated. Sometimes we need strategy in warfare. It's like when David later on heard the word, do not go out until you hear the sound of the wind in the mulberry trees. God gives specific words to show us when to attack and when to wait. So they take Ai. Next, in chapter 9, is the story of the Gibeonites. These people were not far from where Joshua's men were, but they pretend. They use trickery, the artful diplomacy. They bring in dry, crusty bread, worn out sandals, and all these things. Their sackcloth, their sacks are worn out, and their donkeys. The wineskins are brittle. All these things, and they go because they've heard Israel is doing away with their neighbors. The Hivites are the people of Gibeon. So they come in now and they resort to trickery. And they say, make an alliance with us. We will not disturb you. We're from a far country. And, let there be peace between our nations. The key verse here is in chapter 9, verse 14. It says this, so the men of Israel took some of their provisions and did not ask for the counsel of the Lord. They became, again, self-sufficient. Sometimes that happens to us as Christians. We think, well, we've done this before. We preached a good word in that church before. Surely it'll happen again. We need to be dependent upon the Spirit at all times. So they make a pact with them, an agreement that they will not overtake the Gibeonites. And what happens? The deception is uncovered. The treaty has to be upheld because Joshua gave his word that he would not attack the Gibeonites. And then, shortly thereafter, the Gibeonites are looked upon as traitors from a confederation of kings in the south here, and they go and attack the Gibeonites, who were formerly their allies. The Gibeonites are now crying out to Joshua, save us, we're going to be destroyed. And Joshua is in a position where he has to give help to the Gibeonites because he made a pact with them. Sometimes when you're building a church, say you're a pastor, leader, whatever, or some parachurch organization, you need workers, right? You need people to help you build up the ministry. You need discernment to recognize and be aware of the kind of people you are aligning yourself with to make the kingdom of God prosperous. If you don't use discernment here, like Joshua did not, you might have Gibeonites in your ministry. And then all of a sudden there'll be division, there'll be, contesting authority and all these kinds of things. And by that time, you've got a battle on your hands. So the Amorites here attack Gibeon, and Joshua counterattacks 5 kings with armies. And yet he goes up and he begins a warfare and slaughters all these kings, chapter 10, verse 10, and has victory. Another parallel with the church age. Sports analogy. How about football? We just ended recently. I've heard it said over the years, the best defense is a good offense. First of all, when you've got the ball, your defense can rest. When you've got the ball, the opposing team's offense is on the bench watching. They're not a factor in the game. So if you keep the ball, you move down the field, you score points, you are in a better position to win the game than if you are playing defense all the time and allowing the other team's offense to move the ball. Here's the deal with that. When the defense is on the field, they're at a disadvantage because they don't know where the play is going to come from. They can guess. They've got coaches, they've got, all these things, but they still don't know exactly where the play is going to go. The offense does, so they're at an advantage. So we need strategy in warfare. A lot of times we need to attack rather than just be on the defensive and wait for the enemy to attack. I learned from my Bible school days to pray a warfare prayer every day, and I've been doing that for over 40 years. What does that mean? I come against things, even if I don't sense anything or feel anything where I'm under attack, I will attack and be on the offensive. I'll come against things that I know are, things in the land, the spirit of witchcraft and Jezebel here in New England. Other things, infirmity and sickness, idolatry, the things of the flesh. These kinds of things I will attack through a warfare prayer just to be on the offensive so that I'm not passive and indifferent. That's another thing to attack, complacency, and not get hit, blindsided, and then say, oh, I'm under attack, I got to do warfare. Be on the offensive. Be on the attack. So Joshua attacks, and what happens here? A miracle. They're rounding up all these people. They capture the southern cities, and daylight is ending. Night is coming. So he calls out to God, and he commands the sun and the moon to stand still. In other words, light will continue all previously through the night, if you will, so they can continue the battle and win the conquest. A miracle where the sun and the moon stand still. Because of this, all the 5 kings here are defeated, their armies, and it says the land had rest from war. Again, a strategy here. Sometimes you need the miraculous in warfare. Call in at the bequest of the Lord angels to do fighting on your behalf. Deborah does this in the book of Judges. So eventually the scene shifts to the north in chapter 11. You've got northern Palestine. Again, a confederation of kings led by a man named Jabin, the king of Hazor. This army, all these kings get together, they have chariots and horses. Sounds like the southern kingdom did not have that. Another strategy is needed. Some of you may not like this. Joshua, first of all, goes in and attacks by night, which nobody ever did. You can't see very well. Now it's really night. They go in and attack at night. What do? They hamstring the horses so that they are ineffective, unable to provide any kind of military strength. They also burn the chariots. They probably snuck in there, infiltrated the camp here, and they're doing this damage under the darkness, under the cover of night. And it surprises the enemy. All this takes place. Years go by eventually because these armies are strong. Altogether, commentators think there was like 6 years of fighting. Can you imagine that? And they win. They take the northern land as well. The only thing that they did not do, they did not wipe out the Philistines, who become a real thorn in the flesh to Israel, especially during the days of Saul and David, when the kingship, the monarchy, is developed. So Joshua, this guy is swift and divisive in action. He's a man of prayer. He seeks the counsel of God, except in the case of the Gibeonites. Courage was an outstanding characteristic in him. He's a man of principle. Look how he dealt with Rahab, the woman who shielded the 2 spies that he sent into Jericho. He gives his word. Nothing's going to happen to her or her family. And the Gibeonites, he keeps them as servants. I think they were drawing water, cutting wood, all of that. He kept care for them through the years. He was utterly devoted to the Lord. So we now have the second part of Joshua beginning in chapter 13, which is all about the distribution of the land. The tribes eventually are going to take the land. And they see here, rather than just do it by lots, the casting of the dice, they are reminded of the prophecies of Jacob in Genesis 49, Moses in Deuteronomy 33. Probably the priests and Levites, who were teachers of the law, brought this out, and they begin to divide up the land, some of it having to do with the larger tribes, like Judah gets a big proportion of the land in the south. Some of the smaller tribes, not so much land, but still their own land. So they see here the tabernacle is set up at Shiloh. Joshua himself lives near Shiloh. and he begins to settle any disputes among the people. Where did he learn that? From Moses when he was in the wilderness. So he kind of takes on the role of a counselor here and begins to settle disputes. One mistake he made, which eventually we'll see in the book of Judges, he doesn't leave a successor. He lives to be 110 years old. He's faithful. At this time, he's about 90 when the land is being distributed. And he addresses the people in chapter 23. And he's talking to them about how he was devoted to the Lord, and now the land is being given to them, and all these things. And then his famous saying, he gives a farewell address in 23, and all the land is settled here. The tribes move in and possess the land. Remember, that's the key scripture. In chapter 24, he says, "As for me and my house," verse 15, "we will serve the Lord." He gives an admonition, charging them, love the Lord your God, observe the law, avoid apostasy. What did he mean by this? Don't intermarry with the heathen people. There were still some stragglers. They didn't get all the ites, if you will, out of the land. There were still some that eventually get fortified through Israel's disobedience and lack of love for the Lord. They break covenant again, and that is what ushers us into the book of Judges. So, the challenge here today to you, will you love the Lord? Will you completely be devoted to him? Will you serve the Lord? It's through disobedience and a lack of love for the Lord from the heart that we fall into sin, and then the ites refortify. What do I mean by the ites for the Christian? Remember last week I said the revelation of the soul. The ites are things in the mind, in the will, and in the emotion. Do they all get dealt with when Christ comes in and we're born again? No, they've got to be driven out. People still have fear, they still have pride, they still have greed, they still have lust. You war against the things of the flesh. And then eventually the land is yours. You possess the land. You're saved, yes, by the Spirit, but the things of the soul need to be relinquished and dealt with and beaten down to the point where you become free and liberated from these things. Some people may not agree with that. I know some in Christendom would say, well, that is totally done at the cross. And yet some still struggle with doubts and unbelief and anger and these kinds of things. They've got to get free of these things, and it's through warfare. And I believe today, in our present church age, warfare has not been taught, has not been established as a principle, as a discipline, and some Christians suffer because of that. They are either ignorant or they don't want to deal with the things of the devil. So take that to heart, brethren, and be like Joshua. Be a person of warfare when it is needed, but even if you don't see it needed, be on the offensive. Don't let the enemy have any ground in your life. So that's my word for you today. Next week, we'll begin the book of Judges. In the meantime, God bless. Have a great week.